How can we know that a concussion is gone? Well, this is the most difficult thing that we have to deal with as clinicians. So with concussion, and I think this actually came from a previous post or podcast that we did, but we talked about concussion having kind of two recoveries, right? You have the symptom recovery, which basically means you feel better, and that's great. But you also have the physiologic recovery where your brain is still impaired after the symptoms go away. So we need objective measures to be able to tell us when the physiologic recovery has happened, because that's really the dangerous thing. Symptoms don't necessarily really matter in terms of getting a second concussion. It's really the physiologic recovery. So when you're in that kind of low metabolic state, when you already have blood flow impairments, and you're physiologically still impaired, even though you feel fine symptomatically, there's the danger zone. Because a lot of the guidelines that we use in returning athletes back to sport are purely based on symptoms. When your symptoms go away, you can go back to practice. If you feel fine there, then you can play in a game. But we need other ways of being able to challenge the system. Things like physical exertion testing can help with this. So the University of Buffalo has developed the Buffalo Concussion Treadmill Test. That's Dr. John Letty's work, Barry Willer. And that test will help it's supposed to be designed to pick up blood flow impairments and physiologic dysfunction following concussion injuries. We just did a study on another test called the Chicago Blackhawks test, also called the Gapsky-Goodman test. And we found that even though all of our subjects had passed the Buffalo treadmill test, 15% of them still failed the Chicago Blackhawks test. So that may not be enough just to do the treadmill test. So we're kind of taking that a step further and trying to see if there's more that can be done. And so that 15% of people who are asymptomatic and ready to return to sport actually fail that test. So physical exertion testing is one way. You just have to make sure that the test that you're doing is challenging enough for the athletes to make sure that you're picking up any dysfunction. The other thing that is extremely important is having a really good objective set of baseline tests. So baseline meaning you've tested them before the injury has occurred. So there's all sorts of concussion tests out there, whether it be computerized neurocognitive tests or some sideline tests like the SCAD and all this stuff. There's challenges with those tests, and a lot of those tests don't have enough kind of sensitivity and longevity to show up any deficits after the person has become asymptomatic. So you need to find the good battery of tests that will give you good longevity, good reliability, good sensitivity to be able to pick up deficits even though the symptoms have gone away. But with most of those tests, you need to know where the athlete was before the injury occurred, because athletes, they're going to be all over the place. So, throughout a team, half your athletes might have, really, terrible balance. Half of them might have average balance, and then, some of them may have exceptional balance. But because of that variety in individuals through cognitive function, physical function, reaction time, memory, concentration, normative data is simply too wide to utilize. So when you're trying to determine if concussion is gone, the first thing that we'll do is go through the steps of return to play in terms of a symptomatic recovery, but then we'll put them on the treadmill. If they pass that, then we'll allow them to go back and start doing their practices. Then we'll bring them in and do our Chicago Blackhawks test. Then if they pass that, then we'll run them through all their physical and cognitive retests if we have their baseline information and compare that. So we're really taking this a step further to try and make sure that athletes have recovered, because recovery is the biggest concern with concussion. If you have a concussion and that concussion fully recovers and you get another one, so far the evidence has shown that you might not get that cumulative effect. But if you have a concussion, you haven't fully recovered from that concussion, you get another one right in the middle, you are now in a lot of trouble, where you can get this compounding cumulative effect for concussions, and now the recovery starts to quadruple in time for when you're in that low physiologic state. So now you're vulnerable for a lot longer than you would have been had you fully recovered from that concussion. So the big thing we want to encourage is concussion recovery, and that's why utilizing more objective measures such as physical exertion testing and such as a really good baseline battery. All the evidence has shown that if you just do 1 or 2 tests, it's not sufficient. You need to have a really good battery, and that battery, things you should be keeping in mind are you need stuff that has been shown to have good longevity over time, pick up subtle deficits, be very sensitive to the measure, and have really good retest reliability. And as best as you can, put that together into a package, and when more cool science technology comes along, it allows us to do more and more of that testing, but the practice of that should be in place now with the tools that you can to help do what you can now. Anything come in?
Yeah, regarding blood flow impairments and issues, what techniques are used to rehab these issues?
There's a few. So there's particular breathing exercises. You can use kind of a neurofeedback. There's you can do it through neurofeedback, or you can just provide kind of breathing exercises to breathe at a certain rate to try and slow things down, increase the parasympathetic, decrease the sympathetic to try and improve heart rate variability. This also helps to obviously calm you down, relaxation techniques, that type of stuff. The big one though is exercise in a subsymptom threshold manner. So establishing what the exercise tolerance is, what the physiologic tolerance is, and then providing them with an exercise rehab protocol that that doesn't exceed what their tolerance level is. So it's subsymptom threshold, and you gradually increase that over time by continuously testing them to see what their new tolerance level is. And so you're staying below the threshold so that you're not provoking symptoms. And now this has to be done in a very specific way. You can't just tell somebody to go exercise. You have to run them through specific protocols. I mean, that's a 2-hour lecture right there. So I mean, more than I can get into right now, but